اسیر یک نگاه حسین دوست دار مگه خاطر خواهی گناه دیوونه حسینم ویرونه حسینم خراب و مست گوشه میخونه حسینم میخونه حسینم هرچند داری با همه از کرم عباس است خلقت جنت حق لطف کمه خلقت جنت حق از شیعه هر گز نهرا زدی شده کین دشمن گزن هرا زد شده کین دشمن دین ما تحت لوای علم عباس است دین ما تحت لوای علم عباس است ابو فاضل مدد مدد
خدا را شو حسین جانم تو را دارم
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي علا بحوله ودنا بطوله مانح كل غنيمة وفاضل وكاشف كل عظيمة وآزل أحمده على عواطف كرمه وسوابغ نعمه وأؤمن به أولا باديا وأستهديه قريبا هاديا وأستعينه قاهرا قادرا وأتوكل عليه كافيا ناصرا ثم شرائف صلواته ونوامي بركاته على عبده ورسوله الخاتم لما سبق والفاتح لمن غلق والمعلن الحق بالحق والمعلن الحق بالحق الدافع جيشات الأباطيل والدامغ صولات الأطاليل العبد المؤيد والمنصور المسدد المصطفى الأمجد المحمود الأحمد سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم محمد الذي بلغ الرسالة صادعا بها وحمل على المحجة دالا عليها وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا ولا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين وحجته في العالمين روحي وأرواح العالمين لتراب مقدمه فداء واللعن الدائم على أعدائهم وغاصبي حقوقهم وجاحدي مناقبهم ومنكري فضائلهم من الآن إلى أبد الآبدين فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أم لهم شركاء شرعوا لهم من الدين ما لم يأذن به الله ولولا كلمة الفصل لقضي بينهم وإن الظالمين لهم عذاب أليم صدق الله العلي العظيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم الشريف. My very respected viewers, I extend unto you my greetings of respect and my greetings of reverence and my greetings of peace. Assalamu alaikum. We continue our discourse and our inquiry with regard to the reasons and proofs of validity of taqlid as articulated by grand jurists and the Shia denomination. This book is Misbah al-Usul by Al-Khu'i, Abu al-Qasim Al-Khu'i. And this book, page number 538, the author, Al-Khu'i, begins articulating the proofs that legitimize taqlid based on the traditions of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. And then, on the next page, page 540, he mentions these two narrations that go as follows. The Imams alayhim salam, the holy Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, on certain occasions instructed their Shia that they should refer to specific and knowledgeable individuals in order to learn from them. And this proves that a person who doesn't know, he should take counsel with a person who knows and learn from a person who knows. And this, which they describe in following Arabic terms, رجوع الجاهل إلى العالم, the deliberation of an ignorant with a scholar. This recommendation and this instruction for an ignorant person, for a layman, for a common person to deliberate within a scholar, this is an instruction to do taqlid. And he mentions these two narrations, which we will recite to you, inshallah, tabaraka wa ta'ala, and I will translate them for you. And then we will see whether these two narrations really legitimize taqlid. One narration is on the authority of Ali ibn Musayyib al-Hamdani, and the next one is on the authority of Abdul Aziz al-Muhtadi. The first narration, the Imam alayhi salam, Imam Rida alayhi salam, orders Ali ibn al-Musayyib to refer to Zakaria ibn Adam al-Qummi and learn from him. And the second narration, the Imam alayhi salatu wasalam commands Abdul Aziz ibn al-Muhtadi to go to Yunus ibn Abd al-Rahman and learn from them. Okay, these two narrations will come, inshallah. This is the book of Al-Ijtihad with Taqlid, written by Khomeini, the founder of the Islamic Republic in Iran. In his book, Al-Ijtihad with Taqlid, page number 70, he claims that the holy Imams alayhim salatu wasalam irja'ul a'imma shi'atahum ila al-fuqaha. The holy Imams alayhim salam commanded their Shia to refer to their jurists. They instructed the Shia to deliberate and take counsel with their jurists. And this proves taqlid according to him. And then in page number 78, he mentions those narrations and those proofs that according to him, they prove that the holy Imams alayhim salam commanded Shia to refer to and to follow jurists. And he mentions, and he says there are many narrations as such. One narration is that Shu'ayb al-Aqarqufi said to Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, ربما احتجنا أن نسأل عن الشيء فمن نسأل قال عليك بالأسد يعني أبا بصير. This person Shu'ayb said to Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, many a time we need to know something. We need to know something. We are in need of knowing a specific thing. Who should we refer to? The holy Imam alayhi salam said, عليك بالأسد يعني أبا بصير. You must refer to, you must go to Abu Basir al-Asadi. Layth ibn al-Bakhtari al-Asadi. You should refer to him. So according to these scholars, these ahadith, they prove taqlid. Why? Because the holy Imams alayhim salam, they have instructed their Shia to refer to these individuals and follow these individuals and learn from these individuals. And that is taqlid. When a person who doesn't know something, he takes counsel of a person who is a scholar, who is an expert. And thus it proves taqlid. So let's have a look at these sets of ahadith, these sets of traditions from Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salatu was-salam, which carry this instruction, which carry this recommendation that you should refer to these individuals in order to learn from them, whether they legitimize taqlid. Now I'm going to read those ahadith from their sources, and I will translate them for you, and then we will analyze the text of hadith, whether they indeed prove taqlid. كتاب اختيار معرفة الرجال المعروف برجال الكشي, published by مؤسسة النشر الإسلامي in Qom. Here we go, page number 490, in the biography of Zakaria ibn Adam al-Qummi. A hadith that pertain to this very respected companion of the holy Imams alayhim as-salam. Hadith number 1112 and 1113, they concern us. They are relevant to the topic that we are discussing. So Khuyi narrated this hadith. Ali ibn al-Musayyab said, قلت للرضا عليه السلام, I said to the holy Imam Rida alayhi salam, the 8th Imam, I told him, شقتي بعيدة, my house is very far from here. ولست أصل إليك في كل وقت, and I do not have the capacity to access you all times. I cannot reach to you every time I need to know something. My abode, my dwelling is very far from you. فَمِمَّنْ آخِذُ مَعَالِمَ دِينِي, from which person should I learn my religious teachings? From which person? From whom should I learn my religious teachings? From whom should I procure my religious learnings? مَعَالِمَ دِينِي. The holy Imam alayhi salam replied, مِنْ زَكَرِيَّ ibn Adam al-Qummi, go and learn your religious teachings from Zakaria, the son of Adam, al-Qummi, who is from Qum. Al-Ma'amun ala ad-din wa ad-dunya, a person who is trustworthy in the matters of dunya and in the matters of religion. A person who is totally and fully trustworthy and reliable. قال علي بن المسيب, Ali ibn al-Musayyab said, فلما انصرفت, when I returned to my abode, قدمت على زكريا بن آدم, I went to Zakaria ibn Adam, فسألته عما احتجت إليه, and I asked him about all the things that I needed to know. Those things that I needed to know, I asked him and I inquired from him, and he explained to me. So this hadith here, this person asks the holy Imam alayhi salam, I cannot reach you all the time. From whom? Please pay attention to the question of the person who is asking the Imam alayhi salam. From whom should I gain my religious education? From whom should I learn my religious teachings? From whom should I acquire my religious learnings? Then Imam alayhi salam says, Zakaria ibn Adam al-Qummi, he's a trustworthy person. Now, what is taqlid? And does this hadith prove taqlid? What this hadith proves beyond any doubt is that a layman is instructed by the holy Imam alayhi salam to refer to a knowledgeable person, to a scholar, and learn from him. That is beyond any question. That is unquestionably beyond any doubt. This hadith proves that. And that's not something new. However, that it doesn't prove taqlid. Taqlid is not any deliberation of a common man with a scholar. Taqlid is when that scholar's words are hujjah for you. That scholar's words you have to follow. Those scholars' words for you have the force of law, have the same validity as the hadith of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. And Zakaria ibn Adam al-Qummi, there is no evidence that he was a mujtahid, that he was a mufti, that he used to issue fatwa. Zakaria ibn Adam al-Qummi was a narrator of a hadith, and he was a representative of the Holy Imam alayhi salam in Qum. And people used to refer to him and used to go to him and take recourse to him in order to find out different teachings of Islam in the matters of dunya, in the matters of rituals, in the matters of contracts, and other aspects of daily life. However, whether he was a mujtahid and whether that is not proved, there is no evidence for that. Furthermore, in this question and answer, the Imam alayhi salam instructs him to gain knowledge of his religious teachings. And religious teachings is not specific and exclusive to actions of halal and haram. Religious teachings encompass the juristic matters, things that pertain to ahkam, to the rulings, and also it encompasses akhlaq, encompasses tafsir, encompasses theology, understanding the attributes of Allah, and understanding the hereafter, all the matters that religion has a say in them. Religion has a word in them. So religious teaching encompasses all of those. Imam alayhi salatu wasalam instructs this individual to learn from this person. There is nothing in this hadith, quite clearly, there is nothing in this hadith in which the Holy Imam alayhi salam instructs them to follow this person in taqlid, to become his muqallid. So every word of this person, whom do we not, there's no evidence that he was a mujtahid, that his own words, his own opinions would have the same force as laws of Allah for this person. There is no evidence for that in this hadith. So this hadith, quite embarrassingly for the mujtahideen and the jurists, and quite embarrassingly for this famed and very prominent jurist, As-Sayyid Abul Qasim al-Khu'i, doesn't have anything to do with taqlid. If anything, it proves the pathway, it proves the methodology that I propose, that I advance, and I support. And that methodology is that you refer to an alim who knows hadith, and he would narrate hadith to you. And that is exactly what the Holy Imam alayhi salam did. He ordered Ali ibn Musayyib al-Hamdani to go to Zakaria ibn Adam al-Qummi, because Zakaria ibn Adam al-Qummi is a trustworthy narrator of a hadith. And the fact that Zakaria ibn Adam was a narrator of a hadith is proved through his biography, and his traditions, his narrations are present in our books, and he is highly regarded as a master narrator and a very reliable narrator and a very respectable individual. Let me not prolong this discussion and show you something from As-Sistani. As-Sistani, the quite well-known marja and mujtahid of this era, in his book Al-Ijtihad wa Taqlid wal Ihtiyat, which was published in year 1437, about 5 years ago, and page 239, he begins discussing taqlid and rulings of taqlid. And then on page number 240, the reasons and the proofs and the arguments that legitimize and substantiate the institution of taqlid. And he says the first set of proofs are those proofs that are based on narrations, al-riwayat. وَمِنْهَا, amongst the narrations that have been used to substantiate taqlid is the narration that Imam alayhi salatu wassalam ordered Ali ibn al-Musayyab to refer to Zakaria ibn Adam al-Qummi. The same narration that I just narrated to you. Ali ibn al-Musayyab, قُلْتُ لِلرِّضَى alayhi salam, Zakaria ibn Adam al-Qummi. I'm not going to narrate that narration to you. I just read it for you. You can replay always, right? So, however, Sistani takes an issue with this set of argument. Sistani says that this hadith does not prove taqlid. Why? Sistani goes as follows. Zakaria ibn Adam was a very respectable and preeminent scholar, a preeminent individual. However, ليس لنا شواهد تدل على أنه كان مستنبطا بالمعنى الذي هو محل كلامنا. However, we do not have any evidence. We do not have any proof. There is not an iota of any proof that he was a mujtahid, that he was a mufti, with the same understanding of a mujtahid that we have today. in order for us to prove taqlid, we have to prove that this person was a mufti, this person was a mujtahid, and this person used to issue verdicts. And Imam alayhi salatu wasalam, not only that, the Imam alayhi salatu wasalam has told Ali ibn al-Musayyib to go and embrace and follow his verdicts. Zakaria ibn Adam al-Qummi, we have there is no indication that he was such a person. He was a representative of the Holy Imam alayhi salam in Qom, and people would refer to him in order to understand the rulings of Islam in their daily lives. And he was a representative of the Holy Imam alayhi salam. So the Holy Imam alayhi salatu wasalam commanded him بِأَخْذِ مَعَالِمِ دِينِهِ عَنْ أخذ, to learn. Imam alayhi salam commanded Ali ibn al-Musayyib to learn his religious teachings from this person. And that is far from stating that the Holy Imam alayhi salam instructed him to follow him per institution of taqlid, per practice of taqlid. You come to me and learn from me. You are not doing my taqlid. When you go to a person, to a teacher, to a knowledgeable person, in order to learn from him, you go to a mathematician. In order to learn from him mathematics, he will explain to you how mathematics formulas and different aspects of mathematics, different fields, what is it, the content, right? And he explains to you. You do not do his taqlid. You learn from him. Learning is very different from taqlid. Taqlid is when a mathematician tells you this is it, and you take his word on its face value without evaluating its validity. That would be taqlid. Nobody does that in learning. So the Holy Imam alayhi salatu wassalam, this didn't speak of taqlid, and that is what Sistani mentions here. And then Sistani goes further. إلى غير ذلك من الروايات التي يمكن الجواب عنها بمثل ما أجبنا بالنسبة إلى الروايتين المتقدمتين. He says there are more such ahadith. There are more such narrations from Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam, that the Imams alayhim as-salam have told certain individuals that you should learn from this person. But these riwayat have the same answer and same refutation that Sistani says, that I just expressed with regard to the refutation of the narration about Zakaria ibn Adam and Ali ibn al-Musayyib. That Imam alayhi salam is commanding a person, he's ordering an individual to learn from Mr. A. Mr. A, we have no evidence that Mr. A is a mujtahid, or he is a mufti, or he is a jurist who expresses fatwa and verdict. And there's nothing in the words of the Holy Imams alayhim wasalam that he's commanding to do taqlid. He's simply commanding him, ordering him to learn from this individual. And it used to happen that these individuals were anything. These set of ahadith, they do not prove taqlid. Okay, so we are done with this hadith. Let's go to the second hadith. اختيار معرفة الرجال المعروف برجال الكشي تعريف الطوسي. الشيخ الكشي رحمه الله, he had a book, اختيار معرفة الرجال. He had gatherers of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam, hadith narrations about narrators. And that book is lost. Shaykh al-Tusi had an abridged version of this book. He had summarized, he had that book, which was in greater detail. He had taken out certain sections that he did not regard as necessary details. So his version is an abridged version of Ikhtiyar Ma'rifat al-Rijal of Kashi. So this book that we have, that At-Tusi rahimahullah abridged from that original work. The original work has been lost. Published by Mu'assasat al-Nashr al-Islami in Qom. Here we go, page number 409. This is the ahadith that pertain to Yunus ibn Abdul Rahman. Yunus ibn Abdul Rahman was a very respectable companion of several Imams alayhim salam. He had met al-Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, but he has not narrated any hadith from him. Perhaps he was very young. And then he narrated a hadith from the seventh Imam, Imam al-Qasim alayhi salam, and from the eighth Imam alayhi salatu wasalam. And he was very greatly admired by the holy eighth Imam, Salamullah alayhi, al-Imam al-Rida alayhi salam. So, hadith number 935. Abdul Aziz ibn al-Muhtadi says, I said to Al-Imam al-Rida alayhi salam, Ju'iltu fidak, may I be your ransom, may I die in your cause, may I be sacrificed for you. Inni la akadu asilu ilayka as'aluka an kulli ma ahtaju ilayhi min ma'alimi dini. I not always can reach you in order to ask you about the religious learnings that I need to learn. I do not have the ability to always reach you. You are not always accessible for me in order to learn and gain religious teachings from you. So he's not talking specifically about halal and haram. That is very important. And he is talking about general religious teachings. And they could be in usul al-aqaid. And they could be in beliefs or akhlaq or history or tafsir of Quran. And we all know that there is no taqlid. There is no concept of taqlid that applicable to these areas of faith. So the Holy Imam alayhi salam replies, then he says, Abdul Aziz ibn al-Muhtadi says, أَفَ يُونُسُ بْنُ عَبْدِ الرَّحْمَنِ ثِقَةٌ آخِذُ عَنْهُ مَحْتَاجُ إِلَيْهِ مِنْ مَعَالِمِ دِينِ. Is it the case that Yunus ibn Abdul Rahman is reliable, that he is trustworthy, so I may acquire my religious learnings from him? Acquisition of religious learning. أخذ معالم الدين. Acquisition and obtaining and getting one's religious education, religious learnings is not the same as taqlid. Taqlid is not specifically learning religious teachings, right? So there's nothing in the text of hadith that's talking about taqlid. If you want to prove taqlid, it has to, this hadith has to specifically prove taqlid. That Imam alayhi salatu wasalam said that you have to accept the fatwa. You have to accept the juristic opinions and verdicts and fatwa of Yunus ibn Abdul Rahman. There's no reference to that. And then, so the Imam alayhi salam replied, Naam, yes. And that is the totality of this hadith. Now, this hadith does not prove taqlid. You please analyze. You could always replay this tape, analyze. If any one of you challenges me on the accuracy and exactitude of my translation of this hadith is honest and true. And you can compare my translation and show it and check my translation of this hadith and my interpretation of this hadith with any scholar you like. And he may challenge me and he may criticize me. And inshallah, tabaraka wa ta'ala, I will listen to his evaluation and his criticism. However, any honest person would understand that I translated and interpreted this hadith very honestly and very true to what it says in Arabic. آخذ عنه معالم ديني. Should I, is Yunus ibn Abdul Rahman trustworthy? So I may acquire my religious learning from him. Acquiring one's religious learnings from an individual, that is not exclusively taqlid. That is learning from another person. Especially so when we know Yunus ibn Abdul Rahman is a magnificent and a very outstanding narrator from Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salatu was-salam. Let's have a look at the statements of one or two very prominent mujtahideen and jurists in this regard. This is Matarih al-Anzar, the book of Al-Shaykh al-A'zam, the grandest shaykh in ilm al-usul and in jurisprudence, who is more influential than Khu'i, more influential than Al-Kadhim al-Khurasani, more influential than any jurist in the previous 2 centuries, Murtada al-Ansari. What does he say about Yunus ibn Abdul Rahman and his likes? Matarih al-Anzar, published by Mu'assasat Ahlul Bayt lin-Nashr, page number 291. This book has been published by Sistani's one of Sistani's foundations in Qom. أمر الإمام عليه السلام بالأخذ من زرارة. Imam عليه الصلاة والسلام has commanded to learn from Zurara. Learn. أخذ, learn. Acquire religious education from Zurara and Aban and Ishaq and Yunus ibn Abdul Rahman and Zakaria ibn Adam al-Qummi wa Umayri wa Nahwihim and other individuals like him. So this is an answer that pertains to all those ahadith in which the Holy Imam alayhi salatu wasalam recommended a certain individual that you should learn from him. This pertains to all those ahadith. That applies to all those ahadith. So the command of the Holy Imam alayhi salam to learn from these individuals, Zurara, Aban, Ishaq, Yunus, Zakaria, Umayri, and those individuals who are like these named individuals. ممن أدركوا شرافة حضوره عليه السلام وأخذوا معالم الدين عنه بالسماء والشفاهة. Those individuals who had met the Holy Imams alayhim as-salam, who had the honor of meeting Imams alayhim as-salam, and who had the honor and the privilege to learn religious teachings through interlocution, through dialogue directly from the Holy Imams alayhim as-salam, who had this eminent honor and privilege to learn from Imams alayhim as-salam directly. So Imams alayhim as-salam on various occasions have recommended that people should learn from them. Does this legitimize taqlid? Sheikh Murtada says, no, this doesn't have anything to do with taqlid. لا يدل. It doesn't have any implication على جواز التقليد with regard to permissibility of taqlid. This does not prove taqlid. This is not relevant to taqlid. What is taqlid? تقليد is بقول كل من يفتي باجتهاده تعبدا. To accept another person's fatwa because we are submissive. We have been commanded by Islam to submit to the fatwa of this individual. He says, my marja says, do this, do this, do this. Without questioning him, I have to carry those orders out because that's his fatwa. And his fatwa is the rule of Allah for me. So, Imam alayhi salatu wassalam, when he says, go learn from Zurara or this and this individual, he's not asking people to do their taqlid. Why? لأنهم كانوا وسائط بين الإمام وبين سائر الخلق مثل وسائط عصرنا بين المجتهدين والمقلدين من العدول والموثقين. Because these individuals, they were not mujtahid. These individuals were not jurists. They were mere narrators. They were merely middlemen between the Imam alayhi salam and the general Shia, general public of the Shia. These people were narrators. These people were people who would deliver the teachings of the Holy Imams alayhi salam and their words and their hadith and their narrations to the Shia. They acted such as the middlemen and the representatives that Maraji have today. These are exact words of Sheikh Murtada al-Ansari. Today, Maraji have different deputies, different representatives in different cities, right? And because they trust them, because they have been their students or their family relationship or whatever, they trust them. And when people go to these representatives of jurists, representatives of Maraji, and ask them various questions, and these representatives of Maraji deliver the verdicts and juristic opinions of their respective Maraji to the general public. And then Shaykh Murtada al-Ansari goes, وَالْأَخْذُ مِنَ الْوَاسِطَةِ لَيْسَ مِنَ التَّقْلِيدِ لَهُ فِي شَيْءٍ. And when a common Shia goes to the representative of a marja, and that representative delivers to him a fatwa from the marja, this is not doing taqlid of that representative. Likewise, those individuals who were middlemen between the Holy Imams alayhim as-salam and the general Shia, they merely delivered the words of the Holy Imams alayhim as-salam to the Shia. And if a person goes to learn from them, goes to gain from them their religious learnings, it's not doing their taqlid. Very, very clear on this subject. So, And furthermore, Yunus ibn Abdul Rahman was a narrator from Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. Let's have a look at his biography. Al-Fahrist للطوسي rahmatullahi alayhi. Here, published in Qum, page number 266. Yunus Abdul Rahman, Mawla Ali Yaqteen. He was a very outstanding companion of many Imams alayhim as-salatu was-salam. As I mentioned, he had authored more than 30 books. أخبرنا بجميع كتبه ورواياته جماعة. Then Shaykh al-Tusi rahmatullahi alayhi says that I narrate all of his books. And I narrate all of his books on the authority of many of my teachers. Now, books of fatwa are not narrated. Books of fatwa and narration in the older times, in the times of the holy Imams alayhim as-salam, and afterwards many narrators, they narrated books, and they narrate this book. So because his books are books of narration, because his books are books of traditions from Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salatu was-salam, that's the only reason why it would make sense that the Shaykh al-Tusi has ijazah to narrate his books, and he mentions several ijazahs, more than one ijazah, to narrate all of his books. And that proves that this person was a narrator from Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salatu was-salam. Okay, so these ahadith do not prove taqlid. In short, the Holy Imam alayhi salatu wasalam commands a certain individual that you should go and learn from Yunus ibn Abdul Rahman. Learning from Yunus ibn Abdul Rahman does not mean to go and do his taqlid. And Yunus ibn Abdul Rahman is a narrator of hadith, and I've proved. If you remember my discussions and my lectures in the past, I showed to you many evidence that in the times of the holy Imams alayhim as-salatu was-salam, inculcation of ahkam and teaching of ahkam, teaching of religious laws of Islam was through spreading ahadith, not through taqlid, not through ijtihad, not through teaching of verdicts. And at that time there was no ijtihad, there was no taqlid, there was no marji'iyya. And Imams alayhim as-salatu was-salam have referred Shia to go and learn hadith from these narrators. So this, as a matter of fact, not only does not prove the validity of the practice of taqlid as Khoi and Khomeini have desired and have intended. On the opposite, on the contrary, it proves the pathway that I have suggested as taqlid, and that is the alternative way to taqlid is to learn hadith of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salatu was-salam and practice in conformity to the hadith of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. I end my discussion at this juncture, and I'm going to read your comments now, and I will see inshallah tabaraka wa ta'ala if you have any question that pertains to the topic of my discussion, and I'd be glad to answer. So Ali Rab Ali goes, Salam. There is misconception among Shias that Khomeini was a true Shia mu'min. After these lectures on taqlid, could you please make a detailed video exposing Khomeini's beliefs? Inshallah. We'll see. There are many important topics that need to be covered, and we'll see. Inshallah. For the first hadith, besides Sistani, are there any other scholars that believes it doesn't prove taqlid? You don't need any other scholar's testimony. Really, read the hadith. The hadith goes as follows. My house is far from you. From whom should I acquire my religious learnings? From whom should I acquire my religious learnings? Imam alayhi salam says, Zakariya ibn Adam. Zakariya ibn Adam. So, this person is not talking about taqlid. He's asking, from whom should I learn my religion? Learning religion is not same as taqlid. So, Imam alayhi salatu wasalam is referring him to learn from this individual. Learn from this individual. And that individual is not a mujtahid, as Khomeini, as Sistani says. And I do not present these lectures to you in greater detail, and there could be much more detail in these discussions. But what I present to you, there is sufficient evidence in my presentations that would be satisfactory for my objective, for my for evaluating these ahadith and whether they prove taqlid. And if you want greater detail, there's always the option of watching my Arabic and Farsi lectures and try to understand. Dear sir, how it comes that all the jurists now have the same eagerness to behave exactly the opposite of the basic of jurisprudence and what clearly mentioned in the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam's traditions about taqlid. So how it comes that all the jurists now have the same eagerness to behave exactly the opposite of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam's teachings. That is the tragedy. That is the tragedy. I'm not saying all scholars are like that. There are many scholars who are against taqlid. There are many scholars who have been historically throughout history against taqlid. However, the scholars today who do not approve of taqlid, they cannot be outspoken because marja'iyah is so strong financially and politically and socially. Any person who talks about marja'iyah, or any person who talks about taqlid, it would seem that he's an atheist, right? That he is a blasphemous person. How could you? How could you speak against taqlid? If a person is a scholar, he lives in Qom or he lives in Najaf, and he professes publicly, if his opinions are hidden in his book, nobody reads them, that's something else. But he cannot profess his positions publicly against taqlid. Marji'iyah is very dangerous, and followers of Maraji are very dangerous. They are, when it comes to defending marji'iyah, these people, their options relevant to Quran, their options from Hadith, their options from legitimate scholarly arguments are very limited. So they have the practical ways to oppose that person. They will cut him off financially. You know, all financial means in the seminaries are in the hands of Maraji. So how this person is going to live, right? And all institutions around the world, religious institutions, mosques, Husseinias, they are controlled by followers of Maraji. So if a person is against Maraji, this person will never be invited to speak in those mosques. So most people who do not accept marji'iyah, they do not speak about marji'iyah or about taqlid publicly for the fear of the backlash that they would face from Maraji and for the practical ramifications that their criticism of marji'iyah will have. It's very common, actually, if you go to the Hawza, when scholars are in private sessions, for them to criticize marji'iyah. It's or make fun of Maraji, or even curse Maraji. It's very, very common when they are amongst themselves. If there's 5, 10, 15 scholars and they're having a private, friendly discussion, that is very common, really. That even in the offices of Maraji, you go to one office of one Maraji, you will find them, not publicly and privately, those individuals who work there, who run the offices, they would be cursing the other Maraji. That is very common. However, their practice in public is quite different. Okay. What happened to white Mindil, Mr. Al-Layari? What happened to white Mindil? I don't wear it anymore. There are my speeches about the dress of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Please follow those speeches. So, Mindil in Arabic means a handkerchief. Okay. Salam, Sheikh. Do you know of any other scholar who shares the same idea of you when you say you must seek a scholar who explains hadith to the layman rather than doing taqlid? All of Shia scholars in the antiquity, they used to have the same position. Let me show you this book. This what I'm proposing to you today, this was a matter of consensus amongst Shia in the past. This book is غنية النزوع إلى علمي الأصول والفروع تعليف حمزة ibn Ali ibn Zuhra al-Halabi rahimahullah. He passed away at year 585 Hijri. So 585 is the end of 6th century, 585. So he died at the dawn of 7th century. This is a very important book by him, and both in theology, aqidah, and in amal, and ahkam. So he goes here, page number, what's this page number? He goes in this chapter, في عدم جواز تقليد المفتي للمستفتي. It's not permissible to follow, for a mustafti to follow a mufti in taqlid. It's haram to do taqlid of mufti. It's haram to do taqlid of marja. That's his chapter. And then he goes, لا يجوز للمستفتي تقليد المفتي. It's not permissible for the layman to follow the marja, the alim, the mufti, the person who issues fatwa, to follow him per the practice of taqlid. It's not permissible for him to do taqlid. Why? لأن التقليد قبيح. Because taqlid is obviously wrong. Taqlid is wrong. Why taqlid is wrong? Why is taqlid wrong? What is the reality of taqlid? Reality of taqlid is obvious if you pay attention. Taqlid says that you cannot understand hadith. You are not going to understand hadith. Therefore, mujtahid's every word, you have to do taqlid of the marja. Therefore, the marja's every word is the law of Islam for you. This is obviously wrong. There's no hadith as such. And we can understand hadith even if we do not understand Arabic, even if we do not know Arabic, because if a book is just like we understand the book of marja is in Arabic. How can we follow the marja, right? The marja, his book of fatwa is in Arabic or in Farsi. I don't know Farsi or Arabic. I'm an English-speaking individual. How do I practice according to the fatawa, the verdicts of my marja? Because his book has been translated, and that translation is reliable. That translation has been reviewed by many other people who know the original language. And people have testified that this translation is accurate and sufficient. And I have confidence that the translation is correct. And then, not only that, there are scholars in my city that I can call, that I can go to. There are websites that if I don't understand a certain fatwa, I can write an email or make a phone call or go in person, and they will explain to me that this passage in the book of rulings, which is an English translation, means this. So I have no problems acting according to fatwa of my mujtahid, even though I do not understand his language and he does not understand my language. So, likewise, the assumption that we cannot understand hadith is very wrong. We can understand hadith, provided hadith is translated for us in a reliable manner, and it is explained to us if there is some ambiguity in certain parts of the hadith. And if we can understand it, then we can conform to the teaching of that hadith, to follow that hadith, to act according to that hadith. So, taqlid is wrong. Why? Because this assumption, this presupposition that we cannot understand hadith is a lie, is a falsehood. Yes, we cannot understand hadith because nobody explains hadith to us. But if someone was to explain hadith for us, we would understand. There's no reason why we won't understand. Just as books of fatwa we can understand. If nobody translated books of fatwa for us, and nobody explained them to us, and nobody taught us, we wouldn't understand books of fatwa either, right? So we understand books of fatwa because they are translated and explained in a satisfactory manner. Likewise, if hadith is translated and explained to us in a satisfactory manner, in a reliable manner, we can understand them. So, taqlid's first element is that you cannot understand hadith. This is a lie. This is a falsehood. This goes against Islam. Allah did not send a prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, whose words people cannot understand. Allah did not appoint ayers for the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, whose words people cannot understand. That's ridiculous. That's stupid. That's falsehood. So that first element of taqlid is wrong. Second element of taqlid, my word, I'm your marja. You cannot understand hadith. However, my words of hujjah for you, everything I say for you are rules of Islam, laws of Allah. This is ridiculous. Everything you say, you're not a ma'soom, you're not an imam. Allah did not appoint you. If Allah had appointed you as the prophet and he had said that follow him, whatever he says, then yes. But Allah has not done that for you. You are just a person like me. You go and read hadith, and however you refuse, you have the audacity to refuse to translate that hadith for me, and instead you just are giving me your own opinion from that hadith. Your own, and sometimes you have given me opinions that are not based on any hadith. So for me to, whatever this mujtahid says is the ruling of Allah, that's wrong. So the author goes here, لا يجوز للمستفتي تقليد المفتي. Taqlid is not permissible. Why? لأن التقليد قبيح. Because taqlid is wrong. Taqlid is repugnant. قبيح means repugnant. Something that you should disdain. Something that you should obviously regard as repugnant, as disdainful. So taqlid is wrong. ولأن, again, he goes further, ولأن الطائفة مجمعة لأن الطائفة مجمعة على أنه لا يجوز العمل إلا بعلم. You asked me, your question was, who asked the question? Ru asked the question. Any other scholar who agrees with me? Look, he says, because, the author goes, because the Shia have consensus that it is not permissible to act except according to hadith of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. So we have to follow hadith. You understand? This is a matter of consensus. So you're asking who agrees with me. There was a time that all Shia agreed with me, all Shia scholars. However, those times have changed. Now Shia scholars, they follow things that don't have any foundation in Shiism. And they promote their own imamah, their own leadership, except the leadership, instead of the leadership of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. How do I know what's being discussed in the office? Because I've seen them. I was in Qom al-Najaf, right? Okay, let me see what questions do you have in Facebook. I would like to know you have a TV station as you used to have. Ahl Bayt TV. No, I don't. I no longer have a TV station. Abdul Jalil, shut up. I no longer have a TV station. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. May Allah bless you all. Okay, I bid farewell to you. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد اللهم كن لوليك الحجة بن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة واليوم حافظة. Okay. Sheikh, what do you think is the cause of why the concept of marji'iyya is so strong compared to how it was in the past? Why? Because people are misinformed, misconceptions, right? Lack of education, lack of understanding. Because marji'iyya is very strong and it does not allow its criticism in the Shia community. You cannot criticize Maraji. Maraji are gods. Maraji are like imams. You cannot criticize. Can you imagine? You go to a Shia mosque and give a speech against Marji'iyya? No. Marji'iyya is imama. Marji'iyya is the red line. So that, of course, in Maraji they control the money, right? There's this cycle that people are kept in ignorance about Marji'iyya. They're not allowed to criticize them, and people are taught that if they do not give their religious dues to Maraja, their religious dues will be invalid. They will not be accepted before Allah. So they send all their religious dues to Maraja. And that makes Maraja even more stronger. So Maraja now control all the masajid, all the platforms, all the media, and they will not allow anybody to criticize them. And anybody who criticizes them, it's like he criticized Allah. He criticized Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. So just like if you go to a Shia mosque and you try to give a speech and question, for instance, question the infallibility of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam in a Shia mosque, people would get angry. They will kick you out. Likewise, you cannot go to a Shia mosque. Can you imagine which Shia mosque you can go? And they would give you a tribune and they would allow you to question Maraji or Marji'iyya or the practice of Taqlid. They will not allow you. So we have closed down because of lack of information, because of prejudice, because of ignorance, our minds to something that's totally an innovation, a heresy. We have made it sacred, so sacred that now we cannot criticize it. Now we cannot question it. Now it's part of religion. So that's why Marji'iyya is very strong. Marji'iyya is strong because of ignorance of the common Shia and ignorance of the scholars and religious scholars who have pulpits and they are programmed. They have this bias. They have to defend Marji'iyya because Marji'iyya is the last trench of Shiism that they have to in order to defend Shiism. That's not true. Okay, let's see. Faisy goes, Mr. Allah, do you know? Do you know Shamsi? I don't know no Shamsi from England or any place. Do you intend to debate him? I don't know him. Never heard of him. This is the first time I am reading his name. Salam, are you saying we shall embrace the akhbar? I am saying we should follow Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam's words. Faisy goes, Mr. Layari, why don't you have any more TV station? Long story. Salam, are you saying we shall embrace all akhbar? I'm saying we should follow Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam's hadith. I feel like criticism of Marji'iyya was a lot stronger in the past, yet Marji'iyya still came through. Now it's at its strongest point. I don't think they're at the strongest point. No, Marji'iyya is very weak. Marji'iyya, they control masajid, they control the media. But their weakness is what? They don't have any religious foundation. They do not. They are weak. So through education, through spreading awareness, Marji'iyya is a house of cards. House of cards. That is what they are scared of. Your awareness, your information, your knowledge. They are scared of. Very easily, the Marji'iyya could be weakened, and it will be weakened. It will be weakened. It is already. Marji'iyya is not the same after my lectures in Iran and Iraq. It's not the same Marji'iyya as 10 years ago. It had great effect inside the hawza, inside the seminaries. Marji'iyya is not the same, and they themselves admit that, privately, not publicly. So Marji'iyya is facing a serious question of legitimacy in the hawza, in Iran and Iraq, in a very serious manner that the likes of which was not even conceivable 10 years ago. And this will take time, and this will take work, inshallah tabarak wa ta'ala. But Marji'iyya cannot be ended. I'm not saying that we can end Marji'iyya because there will always be stupid people. There will always be ignorant people whom Maraji will take advantage of their ignorance. But Marji'iyya cannot be accepted as a universally legitimate institution in Shi'ism. That is going to end. That is already beginning to happen. So this will happen more, inshallah, tabaraka wa ta'ala. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And because of the practice of Marji'iyya, really, Maraji, what they have done in the last 20, 30, 40 years, for those of people who you do not live inside Iran and Iraq, you do not know what Maraji have done inside Iraq in the last 20 years after the fall of Saddam and in Iran in the last 40 years. They themselves have damaged the institution of Marji'iyya a great deal. So Marji'iyya has lost its respect tremendously also because of the actions of Maraji themselves as well. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. May Allah bless you all. Take care, and we shall see you perhaps tomorrow.
कसम अब्बास अकबर की कसम ज़ैनब की चादर की नहीं मुमकिन के रुक जाए